Hi and welcome to a new Dust 1947 battle report. Today we will continue our league with game number 2, in which the Axis make their debut as they take on the Allies. For full league rules I recommend revisiting the first game of the series, but in short we will play a total of 6 games, starting with smaller skirmishes of 50 action points before heading into the second stage, in which the army sizes will increase. Armies score points by winning missions and by destroying enemy units. Last time around, we witnessed the SSU devastate the Allies, which has seen them take a commanding lead. But this battle might very well change that. We rolled for a mission and the dice came up before. That meant City Showdown, a mission we haven't played before but that promises to be a very interesting affair according to the mission details. So, as the Axis and the Allies began building their forces, we set up the board. In this mission, both sides have taken up positions within a war-torn city and will be trying to wrest control over each other's objectives. In order to win, one side must hold both objectives at the end of any turn. As both sides begin the game fully deployed on the board, units will be pretty much on top of each other already on turn 1. The Allies were to deploy on the south side of the table and chose the building on their left to be their home objective. The Axis, deploying directly opposite, mimicked the Allied player as they chose their leftmost building as objective 2. The Allied force chosen for this battle was quite different compared to the first game. A defensive contingent of a pounder and a versatile ranger weapon squad would be the two units charged with guarding their own objective, whilst the heavy rangers would lead the attack. A squad of bazooka-wielding tank hunters, as well as a close combat squad, formed the backbone of this fast-moving assault force, which was led by none other than the Rhino himself. The Axis went for a similar build, with 3 zombie squads making up the attack elements of the force. Although usually very slow, this particular mission would allow them to be deployed close to the Allies, which hopefully would spare them their usual fate of being blown to bits from afar. Since laser weapons tend to be effective, a trio of heavy laser grenadiers was included as well. Guarding their home objective would be a duo of Ludwigs. The Allies deployed their units in a battle line stretching all the way from east to west. The Heavy Ranger anti-tank squad set up directly opposite the Axis objective, whilst Rhino, attached to the assault squad, deployed in the middle of their force, ready to lend support where it was best needed. The regular infantry took up positions in their objective building, with the pounder as support further back. In the Axis half of the table, units were split up according to their various functions. All 3 zombie squads deployed as far forwards as possible, immediately putting the Allied objective under pressure. The heavy laser grenadiers were hidden out of view a bit behind the horde of undead. Lastly, both Ludwigs secured positions in their objective building. Turn 1 saw the Allies winning the initiative roll, and with 15 zombies already staring down at them, the Ranger weapon squad decided to waste no time. They unleashed a barrage of fire into one of the enemy squads across the road and caused a rather strong 7 hits on their target. Zombies, however, are notoriously resilient, and only 2 of them were brought down. Although their main job was to maintain control of the Axis objective, the Ludwigs saw no reason not to support the zombies. Thus, the rearmost of the Steel Twins moved up to acquire line of sight to the pounder. One of the shots hit home and the pounder promptly failed its cover save roll. Unfortunately for the Axis, no critical hits were scored, but the enemy walker still suffered 4 points of damage as well as an under fire token. The left-sided defense force was already starting to look a bit bleak, but Rhino decided to stick to the plan and so moved his squad eastwards, landing just beside the other Heavy Ranger squad, getting ready to initiate the attack on the Axis objective next turn. The Ludwigs, very much aware of the extreme threat range of Rhino, simply couldn't ignore them. The unactivated one pivoted and began tracking targets in the ruins in front of it. As soon as it spotted Rhino and the assault rangers, it opened fire with all its weapons. Despite sustained fire, it only scored 3 hits, which in the end only succeeded in putting a single wound on the Allied Heavy Ranger hero. Next up to activate was the pounder, which quickly dealt with its underfire token before turning its attention to the swarm of undead. Both of its machine guns as well as the anti-tank gun showered one of the zombie squad with bullets and fire, but the accursed beings proved tough to take down. Despite scoring an impressive 12 hits, 2 of the Axis living corpses remained standing as the dust settled. As the pounder had now activated, the heavy laser grenadiers judged things to be safe enough to move up. They ignored the ranger infantry and instead zeroed in on the pounder behind them with their powerful weapons. The laser special rule, which allows them to continue rolling dice, saw them putting 9 successful hits on the allied walker. To no one's surprise, the last 2 wounds were easily stripped away, resulting in a massive explosion in the southwest corner. Triggered into retaliation, the allied player sent the heavy ranger anti-tank squad into bazooka range of one of the Ludwigs, a most definitely high-risk, high-reward kind of move. With fingers crossed, the bazookas opened up and missiles screamed towards the frightened Axis pilot. Sadly, only 2 hits were scored, and as the Axis made one of the cover saves and no crits were scored, the Ludwig survived the barrage, granted not without suffering some damage. As the allied player had no more units to activate, the Axis player was free to move up all 3 zombie squads, creating an absolutely terrifying sight for the poor ranger defenders. Turn 1 had, as was to be expected from this mission, been bloody. The allies have suffered the worst though, as the loss of the pounder has opened up a severe hole in their defense. Although having caused some damage in return, Rhino and his assault rangers definitely need to perform some serious heroics next turn in order to change the flow of the battle. The allies' objective building is threatened to be overrun, whilst the 2 Ludwigs, at least for now, are keeping the allied forces at bay. At the start of turn 2, the Axis claimed priority. The damaged Ludwig activated and began proceedings by rolling away the under fire token, before leveling its guns at the exposed anti-tank squad. A poor initial roll was helped by sustained fire, and as heavy rangers rely on speed rather than armor, all 3 members were killed, meaning the Axis had now cleared away one of the most serious threats to their objective. Realizing they most likely faced an overwhelming enemy, the Ranger infantry squad gritted their teeth and decided to at least go down fighting. A final desperate volley were unleashed into the onrushing zombies. Since kill points are important, they put all energy into the squad with the lowest model count and successfully blew them all away. The second Ludwig, not having any viable targets anymore, decided to move back to its original position in order to put more distance between itself and Rhino's squad of heavy assault rangers. That backwards move came in the nick of time as the roar of jump packs filled the ears of all units on the battlefield. Rhino had apparently determined the time for vengeance was now. The heavy rangers took to the sky and headed straight into enemy lines. They landed in the Axis home objective, and Rhino himself immediately set to work on the closest Ludwig, punching it into tiny pieces with his dual rocket fists. At least now they had made their mark and were also contesting the enemy objective. A malign grin on the Axis player's lips indicated it was time to commence the zombie attack. The first squad charged screaming through the broken windows into the Ranger squad, and their heavy fists clubbed 2 allied troopers to death for a single casualty in return. The engaged Rangers weren't allowed to catch their breath, as another squad of undead attacked from another direction, turning an already bad situation into something completely horrifying. The tide of zombies crashed into the helpless defenders and ripped the remaining infantrymen to shreds. The allied objective was well and truly lost, and a triumphant howl could be heard from the southwest corner before the zombies opened their jaws unnaturally wide and turned their hungry attention to the lifeless bodies of the Rangers. As the allies were quickly running out of units, the Axis got to go again. The heavy laser grenadiers saw no point in interrupting the zombies mid-dinner and instead opted to move back to support the remaining Ludwig. Whether they could deal with Rhino and his assault rangers or not was anyone's guess, but they would at least give it a try. Turn 2 had been even more devastating than the first one, which in all regards most definitely was a bloody affair. The allied player are down to a single unit, although that one unit happens to be Rhino and a full squad of heavy assault rangers. The Axis have successfully killed off the rangers, but as the zombies cannot capture objectives because of their mindless special rule, both objectives are at this stage considered to be contested. It looks likely the game will be won or lost through the elimination of the enemy force, and we reckon both sides, although battered, still has the potential to come out on top. The Allies managed to win the crucial initiative roll, and so Rhino and his squad could continue the rampage by hurling themselves at the second Ludwig. The Walker made a roll for a reactive attack and succeeded with 1 dice, meaning it could make a single shooting attack at the incoming Allies. It managed to put another 2 wounds on Rhino, which could turn out to be very important before all the rocket fists hit home. Although Rhino actually needed help from his squad members this time around, there was no saving the second Ludwig from suffering the exact same fate as its steel brother had mere moments earlier. The humming of laser weapons then filled the air as the heavy grenadiers moved up into range. They leveled their massive weapons at the heavy rangers and fired, but a poor roll combined with good cover save rolls resulted in them only felling a single trooper, meaning there might be trouble up ahead next turn if the Axis didn't win the initiative roll. Lastly, the zombies, fresh blood dripping from their rotten teeth, simply consolidated their position around the Allied objective. The turn was ended then and there, and the look around the board now confirms neither side will be able to win through the mission criteria, as both the Axis and Allies only possess a single unit each capable of capturing objectives. This battle would have to be decided the old-fashioned way. The zombies have fulfilled their primary job by killing off the Ranger infantry, but are now horribly out of position, which means everything will come down to whether the heavy laser grenadiers will be able to kill Rhino and the assault rangers, or vice versa. Rhino could breathe a sigh of relief as the Allies won priority again. As soon as he had dealt with the under fire token, his squad were given the order to light up their jetpacks and once more follow him into the jaws of their awaiting enemies. The heavy rangers crashed down right beside the heavy laser grenadiers and powered up the rocket fists. But before they could engage the Axis armored troopers, they performed a reactive attack. 9 laser shots could very well be enough to stop the heavy rangers dead in their tracks, and the heavy grenadiers eventually scored 4 hits in total. The Allies passed exactly 2 saves, which was the amount required to keep Rhino alive, although with a single wound remaining. Determined to avenge his fallen brothers, he swung his fists in wide arcs around him, resulting in 4 successful hits after his Berserk special rule had been applied. Heavy grenadiers are damage resilient though, meaning they would have a chance to negate the wounds. However, they only passed 1, meaning the badly injured Allied hero had just barely managed to eliminate the entire Axis squad. The slow-moving zombies didn't particularly fancy their chances of hunting down the enemy jump pack hero, and so held their ground in the Allied objective building. At the end of turn 4, all that was left of the starting forces were 7 zombies and Rhino. The Axis player declared he had no intention of splitting his 2 remaining units up, and as the Allied player was reluctant to pit Rhino, despite his close combat prowess, against so many undead monsters at once, they agreed to settle for a draw, which in the end sounded like a fair deal for both parties. That meant Rhino would at least live to tell the tale as the zombies dragged what was left of the Rangers out of view. The result meant the Allies received 1 point for drawn mission, but annoyingly missed out on the 4th kill point with the slightest of margins. The Axis, on their hand, also got a point for the mission and even breached the 40 action point mark, meaning they would get 4 points for destroyed enemies. Before we move on to the league table, let's first go over the armies. The Allies at least performed better this time around, but can't really be happy with 4 league points. The Ranger weapon squad did their best to halt the zombie advance, but they simply didn't stand a fighting chance with the Pounder going down already on turn 1. The Heavy Ranger anti-tank squad also lost their lives a bit prematurely and could probably have held back another turn to combine their attack more effectively with the other Heavy Rangers. Rhino's escort soaked up wounds when needed and even put the final nail in the second Ludwig's coffin. There can be no discussion regarding unit of the game though, as Rhino's solid stats and healthy set of devastating special rules was literally the only thing able to punch a hole in the Axis armor. For their part, the Axis units had mixed results. The zombie squads indeed succeeded in attracting fire, surviving overwhelming amounts of bullets, and eventually cleared the Allied-held objective. Not bad for a few low-cost distraction units. The 2 Ludwigs did okay with applying long-ranged fire support where needed, but ultimately had no proper answer to the rocket fist-wielding Heavy Rangers. Unit of the game is awarded the Heavy Laser Grenadiers, as they brought down the Pounder and took out Rhino's entourage, despite the hero himself surviving to ultimately destroy them. There's no change at the top of the league table after this game. Despite now having played their 2 games in Stage 1, the Allies are still 2 points behind the SSU. The Axis bring a respectable 5 points from their first outing, and they sure will be searching to up that tally in our next game, in which the Axis will take on the current league leaders, the SSU. As always, I hope you enjoyed the video, despite this battle being a relatively short one. You're more than welcome to drop a like or a comment, perhaps stating which block you're rooting for in the league. Until next time, a massive cheers from Sweden. Bye!